It was a bright California afternoon, and Ronald Reagan stood in front of a mirror, adjusting his classic cowboy hat. The hat was perfect, strong, confident, presidential, but also Western. It was the kind of hat that said, "I can lead a nation and ride a horse before breakfast." Reagan smiled at his reflection. "Well now," he said warmly, "this hat really ties the whole thing together." "That's because I do all the work," said a voice. Reagan froze. Slowly, very slowly, he looked around the room. "Hello," he asked calmly, "is someone there?" "I'm up here," the voice replied. Reagan's eyes moved upward. The cowboy hat tilted slightly forward. "Don't look so surprised," the hat said. "You wear me every day. You didn't think I'd stay quiet forever, did you?" Reagan blinked once, then twice. "Well," he said smoothly, "I've worked in Hollywood. I've seen stranger things." The hat gave a tiny dramatic shake. "Oh, I know you have. But now it's my turn to shine." Reagan carefully removed the hat and placed it on the table. It immediately spun in place like a performer stepping onto a stage. "First of all," the hat began, "you tip me too much." "I beg your pardon," Reagan asked. "You tip me at crowds. You tip me at cameras. You even tipped me at that mailbox yesterday. I'm getting dizzy." Reagan chuckled. "It's called charm, my friend. It's called hat abuse," the cowboy hat replied dramatically. Reagan crossed his arms thoughtfully. "And what exactly do you propose?" "I propose," the hat said boldly, "that I get more credit. Do you know how many speeches I've attended? Do you know how many wind gusts I've survived? I deserve recognition." Reagan nodded slowly. "You make a compelling argument." "Of course I do," the hat replied. "I sit on top of your head. I hear everything. I'm practically a senior advisor." Just then, a strong gust of wind blew through the open window. The hat flew into the air. "Wee-hee," it shouted as it soared around the room. Reagan calmly adjusted his jacket. "I suppose that's one way to make an exit." The hat did 3 full loops around the chandelier, before landing perfectly back on Reagan's head. "See," the hat said proudly. "Aerodynamics. I'm built for greatness." Reagan walked outside toward a crowd waiting for him. As he waved, the hat leaned forward slightly. "Big smile," it whispered. "Confidence. You're doing great." Reagan continued speaking to the audience. "My fellow Americans, project your voice," the hat interrupted quietly. "And maybe stand slightly to the left. The sun's hitting us weird." Reagan shifted slightly. The crowd applauded louder. The hat hummed smugly. "You're welcome." Mid-speech, a bird attempted to land on the hat. "Oh no, you don't," the hat snapped, tilting sharply and causing the bird to miss entirely. Reagan maintained composure. "As I was saying, tell the joke," the hat whispered. "They loved the joke." Reagan smiled and delivered a perfectly timed humorous line. The crowd erupted in laughter. The hat wiggled proudly. See, dynamic duo. Later that afternoon, Reagan sat alone on a ranch bench, looking out at the horizon. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "you're quite the character." "I know," the hat replied. "I've been waiting decades to speak." "Why now?" Reagan asked. The hat paused for dramatic effect. "Because every great leader needs a sidekick. And frankly, I was tired of being silent." Reagan chuckled warmly. "Well, I suppose we make a good team." "Of course we do," the hat said confidently. "You bring the speeches, I bring the style." Suddenly, a stronger gust of wind swept across the ranch. The hat lifted slightly, but held firm. "Not today, wind," it declared heroically. Reagan reached up and steadied it gently. "Easy there, partner." They both looked at the sunset. "You ever think about retirement?" the hat asked casually. Reagan raised an eyebrow. "Retirement? Maybe a museum. Glass case. Nice lighting. A little plaque that says this hat gave excellent advice." Reagan smiled. "We'll see." The next day, reporters couldn't help but notice something different. "Mr. President, you seem extra confident today." Reagan adjusted his hat slightly. "Just getting some good guidance," he replied smoothly. The hat gave a tiny satisfied tilt. And from that day on, whenever Reagan tipped his cowboy hat to a crowd, some people swore they saw it nod back just a little. Because sometimes leadership isn't just about speeches or policies. Sometimes it's about listening to your hat. And if that hat happens to be a sarcastic, wind-defying, advice-giving cowboy hat, well, that just makes the story better.